Thank you. If everyone's ready, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Can we confirm the stream is going? Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Parrish. This is the Stormwater Quality Management Committee meeting. First item is to call the meeting to order, so we'll do that. This is Tuesday, November 9th, 2021. We'll call the meeting to order at 11:03 a.m. Item number 2 is comments by the general public. This is pretty devoted to comments by the general public about items. Oh, sorry, I should take a roll call first before we get started on that. So let me call the member, and if the member's not here, I'll call the alternate. When you hear your name, if you could just respond that you're on the call, appreciate it. We'll start with the City of Las Vegas. The member is Mike Jansen, and his alternate, Rosa Cortez.
Here.
You. For Clark County, Dennis Cedarberg. His alternate, Jimmy Floyd.
Here.
And in Henderson, Ed McGuire. And his alternate, Tom Davey.
Here.
And in North Las Vegas, Dale Daffern.
Present, Steve.
And I too am present. So we have 5 members present. We do have a quorum. And with that, now we'll go on to item 2, which is the period devoted to comments by the general public on items on this agenda. Is there anyone on the call wishing to address the committee this morning?
Hey, Steve, Ed McGuire. I was having trouble logging on. I'm here as well.
Okay, so we'll have you vote instead of Tom.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the committee this morning on public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 3, which is action to approve the agenda. The agenda is in order for approval. Any discussion? Entertain a motion.
Ed McGuire, I would motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor for approval from Ed McGuire. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. And that motion carries unanimously. Item 4 is action to approve the minutes of the August 10, 2021 meeting. The minutes are in order for approval. Any discussion? Entertain a motion.
Dale Daffern, motion to approve the minutes as published.
Thank you, Dale. There's a motion on the floor for approval of the minutes from Dale Daffern. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed say nay. And that motion carries unanimously. Item 5 is action to receive an update on the draft MS4 permit and the draft construction general permit negotiations with NDEP. And I think John Tenert is going to discuss this item. So John, when you're ready, carry away.
Good morning, John Tenert, Environmental Mitigation Manager for the district. This will be a brief update because there's not a lot to report, but it's a standing item. We've met with NDEP on both the MS4 permit, the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System permit, NPDES permit, as well as the Nevada State Construction General permit. We met with NDEP on both those permits. Those negotiations have went well, and NDEP is currently considering our comments, and we're waiting to hear back from them on how they're going to choose to respond to those comments. So this again is just a standing item. We'll have it on each agenda until those permits are, until we have more to report. So that's all I have for that item, Steve.
Thanks, John. Any questions from the committee or anyone else? This is an action item, so call for a motion.
I would motion to accept the report. This is Ed McGuire.
There's a motion on the floor to accept the report from Ed McGuire. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say nay. And that motion carries unanimously. Next slide, please. Item 6 is action to receive an update on proposed water quality standards for the Las Vegas Wash and associated drainages for selenium and other contaminants. Again, John Tenert is going to give us a brief update on this item.
So this is also a standing item that we talked about briefly before. I don't have a whole lot to update on because we're waiting for results from fish collection. So we worked with SNWA, did fish collection in the Las Vegas Wash at the direction of EPA. They wanted updated fish data to collect from the wash. So we collected about 25 carp from 4 different locations in the wash. Those were sent off to the lab last week. So it'll take about a month to a month and a half for the results of that data to come back to the consultant team. Once that data comes back to the consultant team, it'll be processed and analyzed and incorporated into the draft report for NDEP. We anticipate that those reports will meet with NDEP probably sometime in early 2022, most likely sometime in February. We're also working on the draft tributary analysis report. That report is also ongoing. That looks at, if you recall, that talks about contaminants and delisting the main tributaries in to the Las Vegas Wash from the 303D list based on a combined use attainability analysis and other analyses associated with that project. That report is in draft form, and we also anticipate a draft going to NDEP sometime in early 2022, probably around the same time that the draft report on the fish collection goes to NDEP. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, John.
John, can I ask, this is Ed, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So you have fish collected in multiple locations, and if I recall correctly, if any one fish has selenium issues, it's an issue. Is that correct?
No, not necessarily. They'll be composite. So we expect the fish to come back very similar to the previous fish because there hasn't been a real change in the water chemistry or in the water column data or the flow regimes in the wash.
Okay.
But if there is one outlier, that doesn't necessarily create a problem. It would be more systemic. Numbers are statistically significantly different. Would be more of a problem, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, John? Okay, this is also an action item, so I'll entertain a motion.
Dale Dafford, motion to approve the update on water standards for the water.
Thanks, Dale. There's a motion on the floor for approval from Dale Daffern. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed say nay. And that motion carries. Item 7 is action to receive a presentation on the update to the lvstormwater.com website. We did complete an update for lvstormwater.com, and we brought the consultant in to give a quick presentation on what was updated. So Eddie Yang, when you're ready, if you can take yourself off mute and you can begin your presentation.
Hi, my name's Eddie Yan. I'm here with Aspire Design. I am going to share my screen. Everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Start the presentation. It's a brief overview of some of the updates and the goals that we have set between me and John for the renovation and redevelopment or redesign of the Las Vegas or lvstormwater.com. This gives us a little bit of a metric to guide and to show what was being done and what was done. First, some of the redesign goals for the site was to design the site and bring the site to a responsive website designed for desktop, tablets, and mobile devices. Second goal was to optimize, reduce, and condense overall footprint of the site. The third would be implementation of an easy-to-use client editable platform, therefore empowering the client for any type of written content edits and so on and so forth. And the number 4th is a graphical graphic redesign, focusing on navigation functionality for the site, especially focused on mobile devices, since that is one of the main goals for the site to be responsive on a mobile device. The first one will be the mobile site is viewable on all devices, mobile, tablet, a laptop, and desktop, as you can see with a quick little imagery right here. Also something to note, just because of the device, one difference between mobile and tablet versus a laptop and desktop is the lack of a mouse. Some of the actions on a laptop and desktop will be more robust. We will have a little more animations and elements to highlight, like on mouse overs and actions like that. Whereas a tablet and a mobile device does not have a mouse. Therefore, some of those actions and elements were left out. Just something to note right there. Secondly, we optimize, reduce, and condense overall footprint of the site. On our previous site, well, first off, we'll start with pages. Previous site had roughly about 21 pages. The new site's roughly has about 11 pages. The reason for this is to reduce the amount of pathways the users can go through to the site. This reduces overall confusion and increases overall user experience on the site. Our second note would be the links. Previous site had over 106 different links linking outside of the site. We condensed that pretty much overall down to 45 links. Significant portions of the links were some of the older resources, some things that were dated back in like 2005, and some of those resources we did remove. So we updated all those links as well, as far as the permits and DEP permits and therefore. A third metric that we implemented would be a Google Page Insight. Google does have a page insight or page speed insight. It's a little tool that allows you to see where your website is as far as responsiveness, how easy it is to be load, multiple metrics across the board. Here's a little screenshot on the bottom right that shows that I ran Las Vegas, lvstormwater.com through, and we received a 97 point out of 100. Now, these can vary depending on the time of day, if a lot of people's on the server, and so forth, but roughly about 5 to 10 points, give or take. But most of these points are down to the milliseconds. You know, they're judging this down to a millisecond. So anything above, if you notice, anything above 90 is considered great from Google, and therefore very easily accessible to the public and users that are going to be searching for said data or said website. The previous site had a little low score due to the fact it was just older HTML coding and it was not built for responsiveness. There was no mobile devices back then, so this is where Google kind of ranks that a little bit lower. But we are all up to date with most of the most up-to-date protocols for website and mobile responsiveness. Next slide would be easy to use client editable platform, full access site. This particular part was, I'm sorry, I gotta move this a little bit. First part is client has full access to the site from page creation to edits. We both chose a platform where needless to say, if there is changes to the website, John has full access to this. We spent several training sessions to go through the overall platform. I believe John is pretty comfortable with updating the site. Also, John has a privilege and access to allow 3 users to access the site, to edit anything from all the written contents to links. And prior to the update, John does have the final say to publish. That's that one. And I can actually, right now, I'm going to jump off this presentation to show you kind of the overall functionality of the site, to briefly show some of the functions, if I can jump off. And everyone can see my page right there. If you notice, this page it's considered the editor's page for the site. This is a page that John would be on for the most part. On this page, you can pretty much edit the site from here. You know, if we have to access pages, here's the list of all the pages on the site. Let's see if we can redo introduce this. We have collections. These are our content management categories as far as events, frequently asked questions, resources, best manner practice instructions, practices, members, and news. Adding new events to the site as simple as hitting new event, filling out the basic form, saving it, and it uploads to the site, i.e. same thing goes with across all these different forms. This is just something to show the robustness of the platform in which we decide to go with this site. This that definitely does empower the user. I feel that this is one of the strengths of the platform that we decided to go with. Continuing on with the site, we did some graphical design creation for the site to better illustrate the two system that we do have in here in Las Vegas. Images were optimized for desktop and mobile. Visual design, some 3D elements were created to illustrate the storm water. Here's some examples, some renders and illustration to illustrate the differences between the two systems. Example 4 is a plethora of icons that were created for the best management practice to hopefully hopefully correlate a visual icon to a topic without much words needed. And basically that is a brief update and review of the site, which is live currently. And special thanks to John, Jennifer, and Catherine and John for all the input and help with filtering out the information from the previous site to the new site. And that's pretty much all I have for you. Is there any questions I can ask and answer?
Any questions for Eddie?
Eddie, this is Andrew. Great job on
Hey,
site.
Andrew.
It looks really good. We're very, very impressed. And so I assume you're going to be around if we have any needs in the future, in the immediate future for the site.
Yes, definitely.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Thanks, Eddie.
You're very welcome.
This is an action item, so I'll entertain a motion.
Ed McGuire, motion to accept the presentation.
There's a motion on the floor from Ed McGuire to accept the presentation. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. And that motion carries unanimously. Item 8 is action to receive an update on the status of the definition of waters of the United States. And again, John Tennert's going to present this item. John, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we minimize yeah, there you go. Just so that I can see the whole screen. So wanted to give you an update on the waters of the U.S. since some of you may not know, next slide. And some of you may know the definition of the waters of the U.S. has changed again. The Army Corps of Engineers and U.S. EPA halted implementation of the Navigable Waters Protection Rule. So this was the Trump administration rule that went into effect in 2020. And what they've done is they've reverted back to the pre-2015 rule. We're actually operating under the 1986 Waters of the U.S. rule. And it's important for this because it applies to both CIP and maintenance projects. So what I thought I'd do is just talk briefly about what kinds of projects, when a permit may or may not, a 404 permit may or may not be required, just some general guidelines, and then give you some examples of things that are now considered waters of the U.S. Next slide. So projects requiring a 404 permit. These are anything that involves placement of fill into streams, drainage ditches, drainage channels, and wetlands, including detention and debris basins, and temporary fills to provide access to a work site. It also involves rehabilitation of existing facilities that results in a change in the configuration from the original authorized structure, and also any new construction that involves fill into a water of the U.S. or into a wetland. Projects that may not require a 404 permit, and this is just general, but placement and fill to repair erosion in unlined or non-concrete lined facilities to rehabilitate the structure to the previously authorized configuration. So for maintenance purposes, it's important to keep in mind that if if you're just repairing an existing facility back to its previously designed capacity, then you probably don't need a permit. But if that involves any kind of expansion of the facility or redesign of the facility, then it would require a permit. Next slide. Projects that may not require a 404 permit, generally removal of non-trash, sediment, and debris from authorized facilities, as long as there's no temporary stockpiling or storage of dredge material in a water of the U.S. or overland area that discharges into a water of the U.S., resulting in a violation of the permit. Next slide. Projects that may not require a permit generally involve removal of accumulated trash, including materials generated by homeless activity, and any other work that does not result in the discharge of dredged material or an increase in fill in a previously authorized structure. So there's different types of 404 permits, and we'll just talk briefly about two of them. There's emergency permits, there's nationwide permits, there's regional general permit 7, then there's the letter of permission process and individual permits. We generally, most of our projects, we deal with either nationwide permits or regional general permits. And the regional general permit 7 is a regional permit that applies just to Clark County and applies just to facilities associated with the Clark County Regional Flood Control District Master Plan facilities. Nationwide permits apply as the name applies across the nation and has general categories of, there's more than 50 of them, to general activities that are deemed by the Corps of Engineers and EPA to be have minimal impacts to waters of the US. And so those are the two permits that we generally apply. Next permit, next slide. So what is a water of the US? What I thought I'd do is I'd just give you some examples of some current things that are waters of the US. This is a picture of Hoover Dam and the Colorado River. Obviously, the Colorado River is a water of the US. Next slide. This is a perennial drainage in near the city of Mesquite. This is actually consists of largely of runoff from a golf course, but because it is perennial, it is considered a water of the US. Next slide. This is a dry ephemeral drainage. This is probably the biggest change for Southern Nevada with the reversion back to the 1986 rule, is that under the Navigable Waters Protection Rule, the Trump administration rule, ephemeral drainages were exempted from coverage under the 404 permit program. That has since been reversed, and so now ephemeral drainages like this one in Mesquite are now considered to be waters of the US if they have a connection to a traditionally navigable water or have a reasonable nexus. Next slide. This is a drainage in the Las Vegas Valley near the Naples Channel near the airport. This is also considered a water of the US because it has perennial flow. Next slide. This is, again, another example. This is near the Silverado Ranch Detention Basin. This is an example of an ephemeral drainage that is considered a water of the US and is jurisdictional. This is an image of the Charleston Drainage storm drain project that's just underway. Because this is largely a storm drain in an existing street underground, this would not be considered a water of the US and therefore would not require a 404 permit. The last one is this is an ephemeral drainage in the southeast part of the Las Vegas Valley. This is a drainage of Duck Creek. Now, if we were lining that, the red line shows the project extent. If we were lining that entire channel, that would definitely be considered a water of the US. The actual project diverts flow up Las Vegas Boulevard and then down Windmill. But because it's considered to be an indirect effect to a water of the US, that project, even though it's a storm drain in an existing right of way, it would also require a 404 permit because of indirect effects to waters of the US. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for John? I'll point out too, just a reminder to the members that we entered into a Section 214 agreement with Sacramento District to expedite review of environmental permits. And so if you have a project coming up where you need a permit, a 404 permit, you can utilize that 214 agreement to expedite that review. And if you have a project coming up, you can work with John to get that done. If there's no other questions, this is an action item. I'd entertain a motion.
Dale Dafford, motion to approve.
Thanks. There's a motion on the floor for approval from Dale Daffern. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. And that motion carries unanimously. Item 9 is action to receive a presentation on final stabilization regulations in the Las Vegas Valley. Again, Mr. Tenner, who just got some water, I see, will be giving another presentation. Go ahead, John.
Thank you. So this presentation just wanted to give the members an update on the status of some discussions that we've had and some challenges that we've had with respect to final stabilization for construction projects in the Las Vegas Valley. So just by way of background, construction projects that are greater than 1 acre are required to obtain coverage under the Nevada Construction Stormwater General Permit. So that's a general permit that is currently under revision by NDEP at this point. That permit requires that final stabilization be completed before NDEP will close out the permit. It's important to note that there's no requirements for final stabilization under the MS4 permit. This is just for the construction general permit. So what do we mean when we talk about final stabilization? It means that all soil disturbing activities at the site have been completed. All construction materials, waste, and temporary erosion and sediment control measures have been removed. So you can see here, back at that previous slide, you can see in the picture there that the final stabilization is not yet complete because there's still the BMPs in place. So those BMPs would have to be removed before final stabilization could take place. Next slide. By final stabilization, NDEP defines this as a uniform, annual, and/or perennial vegetative cover with a density of 70% of the native background vegetative cover for the area is in place on all unpaved areas and areas not covered by a permanent structure. So this 70% of the native background vegetative cover means that if prior to construction, there was 50% of the land cover was vegetated, that means that after the construction occurs, the final stabilization would be 70% would be required of the 50%, not of 70% of the total. So it really is incumbent upon contractors and project proponents to document how much vegetative cover is on the site prior to disturbance. And then final stabilization also means equivalent permanent stabilization measures, such as the use of riprap, gabions, gravel, geotextiles, or other NDEP approved methods have been employed. So you don't necessarily have to use vegetative cover. You can use other methods as long as they're approved by NDEP. The permit requires that the operator shall implement a stormwater pollution prevention plan from initial commencement of construction activity until final stabilization is complete and a notice of determination is filed and approved by NDEP, or an NOT transferring the site to a new operator is received by NDEP. So it's important to note that on these sites, regardless of what the status of construction is, you have to operate and maintain your SWIP, your stormwater pollution prevention plan, and be doing your inspections on a regular basis until that NOT, the notice of termination, is approved by NDEP. So we'll talk about in a minute some of the challenges associated with that as we move forward. Slide. Now, the other complicating factor in this is that the Clark County Department of Environment and Sustainability, this is formerly known as the Department of Air Quality, also requires final stabilization to be achieved prior to closeout of dust permit. So you can see this is a truck spraying down dust palliatives. And that's one of the measures of final stabilization that is approved by the Department of Air Quality, by Clark County Air Quality. The challenge that we come into is that requirements for final stabilization between Clark County Air Quality and NDEP do not always align. And so the permits can remain open for years due to challenges associated with final stabilization. And remember that as long as these permits remain open, we're required to continue to maintain the SWIP, continue to inspect the site on a monthly basis at least, in order to be able to keep that permit in compliance. Next slide. So I want to talk about one example of final stabilization that has become problematic, and that is asphalt millings that are used. This is reclaimed asphalt, also known as RAP, that has been used in some places as final stabilization. It's a beneficial reuse, it saves taxpayer money, and it helps reduce landfill disposal, because otherwise that recycled asphalt would end up in landfill. Challenges with asphalt millings is, in general, the Clark County Department of Air Quality will allow RAP as final stabilization for air quality purposes. The NDEP will generally not accept RAP, which may significantly increase costs to public works projects. One of the things that in the research that we've done, the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality allows the use of asphalt millings in road prisms, provided that the grindings are either covered in capped or compacted. The Oregon Department of Environmental Quality states in a fact sheet that tests have shown that PAH compounds do not leach from asphalt grindings, but they still require them to be compacted. However, NDEP maintains that RAP is not permitted as final stabilization in Nevada. Clark County produces its own asphalt millings from street repaving and reuses that for compacted final stabilization on county projects at zero cost, saving taxpayers millions of dollars each year. Another agency in Nevada, in Southern Nevada, is looking at a potential $500,000 to $1 million change order to switch from compacted asphalt millings to rock stabilization. In arid environments, the problem with the revegetation is that those efforts can take years to fully develop, and there's no standard for determining when enough revegetation has occurred. Other methods of final stabilization are often not feasible due to cost and engineering considerations. So there may be certain places where, based on slope or other types of engineering requirements, that you can't put down rock or riprap as final stabilization. And NDEP is proposing in the current permit that permits remain open for a minimum of 3 years if revegetation is selected. So again, we would have to hold those permits open for a minimum of 3 years while we wait for the re-veg to take place. Staff has requested that NDEP and Department of Air Quality coordinate and define a common set of allowable practices for final stabilization that are reasonable and cost effective. There has been some coordination between NDEP and Clark County Air Quality, but not a lot. We're still waiting for some of that coordination to occur. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide additional information. I think there's other members of the permittee staff that are on the call that might also be able to jump in and answer any questions. We just wanted to give you this presentation as a informational item.
So Jimmy Floyd, Clark County, I guess that's the question I'd like to ask with NDEP is, what is the concern with RAP using it? And is it a perception? Is it just, they don't know what the problem is, if there is leaching or something like that? I know I've heard that kind of concern. I've heard concerns about as far as it breaking down. And I mean, there should be a process to where we can either prove that is the case or it's not the case. Because it is a significant cost on our projects. I mean, we're being asked to final stabilize it, but then we don't have a lot of options. And I think If we have a product that's already been generated as part of the project, it doesn't make a lot of sense environmentally to go then have to crush native stone, transport it across the valley, and then place it when we have a product that's created there on site. So I think the question is what sort of test can we potentially go and do on the material to prove that it's not an issue?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. We would have to have more discussions with NDEP on whether or not that's something that we could look at. But we'll take that back to NDEP and ask them for guidance on that approach.
Hey, Jimmy, this is Dale, North Las Vegas. Some of the discussions we've had with the NDEP, because we have several projects that have not been closed out either. They kind of look at the wrap as being something that can be disturbed, but without blacktopping or laying concrete over everything, anything can really be disturbed. Their logic is kind of flawed.
Yeah, I think we just need to go to them and see what the concern is, and then address it, and then test it, and see specifically what is the the concern. It's being disturbed. Any sort of rock can be disturbed. I mean, when we go out there and crush 3/8 gravel and put it out there, ½ inch or whatever, and put it out there.
Hey guys, it's Catherine from NDEP. Liz is trying to get on to answer your question. So if you guys can wait for a second and see if she can figure that out really quickly.
Thank you, Catherine.
I see Liz talking, but no, can't hear her.
Yeah, can you unmute her?
Is she on mute, Tammy?
Let's see, checking for you. Elizabeth Kingsland. Her mic seems to be open. Elizabeth, can you say something?
Well, maybe we can give her a few minutes to figure that out, and then we can address the question if you guys want to move on. I can answer some of the questions in terms of what Jimmy was referring to, but I'd rather wait for Liz if she prefers to answer that. I mean, it's basically what we had discussed before.
Well, why don't we table this item until the end of the agenda, and then we'll take a vote at the end of the agenda. It looks like she's going to try to call in. We'll do that. Move on to the next few items.
Thank you.
Okay, so item 10 is go to the next slide, Tammy. Item 10 is to discuss the FY 21-22 quarterly progress reports and take action as deemed appropriate. The quarterly reports are all submitted in by each of the different permittees. Quarter one usually doesn't have a whole lot of action, but there was quite a bit of street miles swept and that type of thing. I know that we did contact each of the TV stations and got quotes for the public service announcements that I think will run in the fall, late fall. Is there any other comments or anything that any of the permittees want to mention about the quarterly reports? Any issues or trouble out there or successes that you want to report before we move on?
Steve?
Yeah.
I'll just add that one of the things that we didn't put a formal item on the agenda, but just to notify the committee that the annual report for the fiscal year 2021 was completed and successfully submitted to NDEP within the time frame required on the deadline required. So the annual report has also been submitted and it is available.
Okay. Thanks, John. Any other comments? And this is just a discussion item unless there's some action deemed necessary by the committee. So if there is no action, we can move on to the next item. Which is item 11, discuss monitoring activities and issues and take action as deemed appropriate. Dry weather monitoring, does Xiaoping or Todd Tejan have anything to comment on dry weather monitoring from SNWA?
We just still do the quarterly base, and we kind of wrapped up all the quarterly sample for dry weather from tributaries this year. And the only difference is we switched the lab for the last quarter sample analysis. So, no, actually, no, I was wrong. So we are going to switch lab, but for the dry weather water quality sample this year, we still use the same lab. Next year, we're going to use different labs. And so all the data upload to the database. And so no delay, no cancellation for 2021. Everything on schedule. That's all I have.
Is there anything in the results that caused any concern?
Not really. And the result is very consistent from all the tributaries. And based on the data, we look at it and know anything alarm.
Okay. Any questions for Xiaoping? Okay, we'll move on to wet weather monitoring. Angie, do we have any updates on that?
Yes, so we went quite a while without having any rain, and we do have some results from the July event. So I believe that was distributed to the permittees. So in general, it's what we would expect. We saw a little bit higher in the total suspended solids. So that was around 2,000 parts per million at both sites, at Club at Sunrise and at Rainbow Gardens. We saw over 1 part per million for total phosphorus. And that's okay. That's basically the nutrients that are bound to the solids. The good results are that the dissolved solid concentrations were low. So the orthophosphate, the dissolved phosphate, which we're really more concerned about, that was 0.2 parts per million. So just elevated solids, but not on the dissolved side. So overall, it didn't seem like there was anything that raised any level of concern in the July 2021 events.
Thank you. Any questions on that? This is also just a discussion item, so if there's no comments and no action, we can move on to item 12, which is discuss Nevada Division of Environmental Protection issues and take action as deemed appropriate. Is there anyone from NDEP that wanted to speak? I don't know if Elizabeth has her audio worked out yet.
Hi, Steve. This is Liz Kingsland. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I did have one announcement. I know you guys all know Catherine very well, but I did want to announce that she is now our staff 2 engineer. So she is going to be one of our permit writers. So just congratulations to her. So you'll still be working with her a ton, but she'll be kind of working in a different fashion in terms of addressing more on things on the permit end of things. And Catherine, I don't know if you want to add to that as well.
Just I'm honored to work with you all, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Great. Well, we're glad to hear that the permit writing position has been filled. So looking forward to working with Catherine. Any other comments?
No, not this time.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to item 13, which is discuss other stakeholder issues and take action as deemed appropriate. I don't know if NDOT or Nellis or anybody else, other stakeholders are on the call, would like to say anything at this point. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 14, which is discuss items for next SQMC agenda. I don't think there were any items that were brought up during this meeting that need to be added to the next agenda. Is there any other items that any of the committee members or anyone else would like added onto the agenda next quarter? Okay, hearing none, we'll move back to the item 9 that was tabled regarding the final stabilization, and there were some questions about that. So Liz, if you could, if you want to comment on those questions that were being asked.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so, and Catherine probably have some additional to add in terms of the actual, some detailed projects, but I will say that, I've had, a number of conversations with Andrew Dixon about that. And I feel like we've had a few conversations with some of the stakeholders. I can't exactly remember who, but I would say that RAP is a method that we would consider, but we need to look at kind of the site-specific locations. I've had some experience in my past in working with it, and I think there is absolutely, an effective use of it. There are certain methods to ensure that it's, I think it installs effectively so it doesn't break apart. And there has always been some concerns about, using it around waterways, because there is some studies that have shown, some impacts to like aquatic life based on, being this asphalt material. So I think we've really avoided some of those areas and wanting to consider those, and then large, expansive areas. But I would say that we're definitely willing to have a conversation and look at a site-by-site scenarios like where they want to apply. I do recall in particular, I think one of the cases we were looking at was in, along a roadway, and it seemed like a real appropriate case where, throwing any vegetation there was going to be really pretty difficult, and it was a nice linear setting that it seemed like a real appropriate use there. So I would just ask, maybe you guys, we could schedule a meeting and kind of go through some specific scenarios that you guys are talking about, so we could kind of run through, specific concerns maybe in different areas. But I would say it's definitely not something that will be taken off the table as a mechanism to be used for stabilization. And Catherine, did you have anything more to add on that end that I'm maybe missing or glossing over there?
Just to reiterate what you said, it was primarily an issue. There were several projects that were right along the Las Vegas Wash. One in particular that was around 5 acres that was approved in the past that shouldn't have been. So those types of projects would not be in the running, if you will, to use RAP in those situations. And as you had mentioned, how Oregon DEQ had that those asphalt millings, once they're capped or whatnot, it becomes a better option than just laying down asphalt millings. Some of the information, it seems like that we had discussed may have been misinterpreted or maybe just overgeneralized, but we're always open to looking at these on a case-by-case basis, just to reiterate that. So just, you all have, if you don't have our phone number or my cell, you can easily reach out to us, and we can help you figure out if that's a good method or not for your particular project.
This is, by the way, Dale with the city of North Las Vegas, that the case-by-case basis is really tough for us to deal with it that way. We have to contract out all of our work, and we've got to know before we issue contracts on whether a stabilization method is approved or not. And if we wait till the end, it's a big change order, or it might not even be fathomable to do certain methodologies once you've, for instance, built an overpass like we did at Tropical Parkway, where we thought a certain method was going to be approved and it didn't. So we've got to know well in advance of contracting these things on what will be approved.
Liz, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer?
Oh, you might be on mute again, Liz.
Oh, sorry. I am on mute again. I was just going to ask if there isn't a place within your process as you're, putting together, or maybe just prior to putting together your construction documents, that you could reach out and we could have that meeting and have that discussion, because I absolutely understand, doing a change order at the end is costly and difficult for you as, implementing the project. But I'm just hoping there might be a way for us to have that conversation before it goes out to bid.
Yeah, we could probably do that. I mean, one more meeting isn't going to kill us, but really, I honestly think you really need to get on the same page with, the local jurisdictional control on that too.
It seems like if there's a way to standardize it a little bit so that we know on each project what techniques are available, and then move forward. I know some projects we're going forward with, and it put the onus on the contractor it just said, stabilize. That was the bid item, and it was on the contractor then to go figure out what can be done. And that tends to, cause a lot, like Dale said, it causes expensive change orders. If we have to do it during the project, it's much more difficult than if we can do it prior to the bid. And so, meeting is okay, but it's just, we have a lot of projects, and so it'd be a lot of meetings, I guess, is where we're at. And I get that there's differences between, a lot of the stabilization for us is just where areas were disturbed during construction along a channel, for example. But there can be staging areas and things like that were disturbed. Maybe the contractor got into with a private owner nearby the site and figured out that they could stage equipment and things there. So that could be a bigger area. And it kind of sounded like Catherine was concerned about those bigger areas being, stabilized with the asphalt. But those same property owners don't want 6 inches of gravel on their property either, which they would have to remove probably to develop it in the future. So
I think, like Liz says, if we could just schedule a meeting with all of us, and then we can hammer out those details, that would be beneficial for everyone. There are some local municipalities within the valley that are trying to include that in their RFP process, so that it's up front and center as soon as the bidding process begins, or actually even before the bidding process begins. So those conversations might want to be had within the MS4 permittees to see what everyone else is doing, because that's been effective for them.
And Steve, I feel like there should be a way to get to probably a little bit of a standardized, so you guys have a little bit of, like what's absolutely okay in some areas that are absolutely, not going to go through the process, so that you have that. And then really just to kind of hone in on the conversations where there might be some question about, like, will this work in this area? So I agree, you probably don't want to talk about every single project in every single little area, but I feel like, we can kind of get to kind of having some set things that we can all agree on to say, yes, definitely here, no, definitely here. And so that we're just kind of talking about the ones that are harder to kind of nail down. So.
Yeah, that'd be great. So we'll go ahead and reach out to you guys and get a meeting set up and invite some pertinent people down here and see if we can get a little closer on it.
That sounds great. Yeah, I think we can get there.
Okay, perfect. Any other comments or questions on item 9? That is an action item, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve. This is Jimmy with Clark County Public Works.
Thanks, Jimmy. There's a motion on the floor to approve the presentation from Jimmy Floyd. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 15. Hurry, Tammy. Item 15 is comments by the general public. It's period devoted to comments by the general public on any matters relevant to these SQMC. Is there anyone out there on the call that would like to address the committee on any items related to the Stormwater Quality Management Committee? Okay, hearing none, I believe we can adjourn the meeting at 11:57. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, when's next meeting?